Hello, everyone. This is Allison Jones. I'm with the ECTA Center, and we are going to begin webinar 3 of the Recommended Practices for Engaging Families series. And I'm joined today by colleagues from the ECTA Center, including Stephanie Moss from the Region B PTAC Center, the Parent to Parent of Georgia, and Peggy Kemp, Executive Director of the Division for Early Childhood. So we want to start with a recap from webinar 2, and I just wanted to highlight the purpose of this series is really to serve as an introduction to the DEC Division for Early Childhood, as well as the Division for Early Childhood Recommended Practices, and the ECTA resources that have been developed to support practice improvement based on those recommended practices. And this screen image that you see right now is the landing page on the ECTA Center's website. As a reminder, the DEC recommended practices consist of 66 practices in 8 topical areas. And those topical areas are assessment, environment, family, instruction, interaction, leadership, teaming and collaboration, and transition. And you can see on the left side of the this website page, these are organized, these practice improvement tools are organized by type, which also includes the audience, and then they're also organized by topic area. And the last webinar we had, we really highlighted 3 of these tools in particular. So we highlighted the performance checklists, the practice guides for practitioners, and the practice guides for families. The performance checklist is the first tool that we really kind of highlighted. We talked about these are created for practitioners and in some cases for leaders. And these are designed as a self-evaluation to evaluate how you're using the key characteristics or those indicators of the practices. And then the next tool on the next slide is an example of a practice guide. This practice guide is for practitioners, and every practice guide is written using the same format based on effective adult learning practices. So we have an introduction that really describes and kind of unpacks what the practice is, what it looks like. There's a video illustration of the practice. We have a section of performing the practice. So this gives you information on how to do the practice, what it looks like. And again, there's the video, the icon with the video. And then there's an illustrative vignette that gives you more examples of what it looks like. And then the last piece of the practice guide is the section titled "You'll know the practice is working if." So this is really, going to lead you to those child and practitioner outcomes or family outcomes. And then the next slide is just a word cloud where we kind of captured some of the comments from those who have participated with us in the last 2 webinars. And we took this from some of our discussion chat room or chat box comments, as well as some of the information and comments you provided in the evaluations following each webinar. And so participants commented that the materials that are translated into Spanish will be really helpful and useful, providing more access to more families. They liked that the practice guides for families are family-friendly. We have written them in family-friendly language removing jargon, and providing a lot of definition and explanation around terms that we might use. They found these materials will be helpful in preparing families for IFSP and IEP meetings. There were comments about this was helpful, that it provided information beyond compliance. And you can see a lot of other comments that were shared. So at this point, let me share the session objectives. So the beginning of the webinar series, like I said, was really to kind of give you the introduction to the Division for Early Childhood, the recommended practices, and then, like I said last week, was to kind of familiarize you with additional resources that have been developed to support your use and family use of those recommended practices to then benefit children. Today, the purpose is to really take you through real-life scenarios related to your work at parent centers and the resources that can support your work with families. So we're trying to kind of bring it to life for you today. So I'm going to pass it on to Stephanie Moss.
Thanks, Allison. And again, my name is Stephanie Moss. I work with the ECTA Center as well as the Region B PTAC, Parent Technical Assistance Center, here at Parent to Parent of Georgia. And like Allison said, in addition to the official, formal learning objectives for today, what we really want to do is help you connect the dots and help you think about the information that we've shared with you in the past 2 webinars and the resources and tools that have been developed, and how can you use them if you're a parent center staff member in whatever role. We're going to look at some different roles. How can you use the information in your work? And we're going to do that by just looking at some scenarios and then tying it to some of the specific tools. So we hope that through the next little while, looking at some various scenarios, that we're going to make it clearer for you about how all this can really make your job a little bit easier and really help enhance your interactions with families in your work on a daily basis. So let's start with our first scenario. So the first one, as you'll see here, and I'm just going to kind of paraphrase for you. This is a scenario where a person who works for a parent center in her state provides a lot of trainings. She's responsible for providing training, and one of the trainings that she offers a lot addresses effective communication and working together as part of a team. And it's time to update the curriculum, right? She doesn't even know where to begin. How do I do that? We know updating curricula and training materials is an ongoing task for parent centers. It certainly is at the center I'm at. The DEC recommended, and it's important, let me say, it's important to make sure you have current information and research-based content to put into those materials to really make sure that you're giving families the best information you can, and it's just good, rich content. The DEC recommended practices are a great source of that material, and in some cases, I would even think, and as I've looked through them, I think some of the materials, some of the information can even be applicable not just for families of younger children. Particularly in this scenario, we're talking about teaming and collaboration. We're going to take a look at a couple of those tools. You might find that some of that content is just as applicable for families with older kids as it is for young children. So let's, one of the practice tools that supports teaming and collaboration, we want to take a look at those. So again, back to the landing page. If you see on the left-hand side of the screen that green bar, you can see you are actually able to search the tools by type. So in the case of the example we're looking at, we're going to look at teaming and collaboration. I've already clicked through to that for you, and you can see the types of resources are there. Checklists, illustrations, practice guides for practitioners and families, and then the resources in Spanish. I really want to encourage you not only to just look at the practice guides for families, but if you were in this scenario or in other parts of your work, look at the performance checklist and the practice guides for professionals for content as well. I think that all of those pieces, they all connect together, they all link together, tie together, and really can help you find that good content that's going to help. In this example, we've got a few more arrows, and we've pointed out to you the family guides that address participating on your child's team and then working together with other team members. There's really good content that would be a great place for this person to start to update the training curriculum. On the next slide, you'll see on a screenshot of the practice guides for families. And so, for example, here's what you might want to do with this. You might take that practice guide for families and think about adding some content to your training around quality, good communication skills, right? And you might even insert some tips for families. So and the arrows are just pointing you at some of this, could summarize some of the tips. Allow enough time for each person to talk and really listen to one another. Take the time to think about what you want to say before you talk to another team member. Start each conversation by explaining what you want to talk about in order to set the stage so everyone's on the same page. So again, none of these are like things that you've not thought of or things you've not done before, but it gives you a really good basis for either refreshing the content that you might use in training or adding to it and maybe some sort of a tip sheet or something. The other thing that I would really point out is on the right-hand side, you see, and you'll remember the family practice guides all have a video of the guide. And you can take those videos and embed them in your training. It's a great way to, practice some adult learning strategies by mixing it up and not just training where you just talk to a group of families the whole time, but that you put in some videos and some other forms of other formats to kind of keep them engaged. So let's take a look at another scenario. This second scenario is also one that kind of is focused on the broader kind of reach that a parent center might do. In this example, Steve works for a parent center in his state, and his job is he's responsible for the website and social media presence. And he's busy, always preparing his calendar of information and materials, and what's he going to share over the next 6 months, and how's he going to schedule that out. And what he notices is that he's lacking good content that focuses on early childhood. So what we want to do is take a look at how he could use the recommended practices and the various resources and tools in his planning. So kind of as a reminder, Allison mentioned as we started, there are 8 broad topics covered by the recommended practices. My suggestion, one way you could approach it would be to focus on one of those broad topics each month. That's 8 months of content right there, right? If there's 8 topics. And then you can divvy those up into small bits of information for social media posts or to highlight in other ways. In this example right here, we just focused on assessment. So if I went, hey, April is assessment month, and we're going to provide you tips for families to prepare for your child's assessment. These were pulled from the practice guides, the assessment family practice guides that there's 2 specifically that I pulled these from: Family's Role in Informed Clinical Reasoning and Partnering with Your Child's Assessment Team Members. Yes, and you should have received an email. Parent Center directors, if you're not a director and you're on the webinar, it was forwarded to your director, a reminder email yesterday that included the links to the specific tools that we're showing you today. We can get that out to you. It'll come out also in the email that you'll get after the webinar with the evaluation. So hopefully that'll be helpful for you. But look, so this is four tips on assessment, preparing for your child's assessment, readily pulled from family practice guides. All you got to do now is add some colorful pictures or some images, and you are ready you've got 4 weeks of social media posts, for example, if you're looking for Facebook posts that you think you want to use. Just like that, done, ready to go. Some other ideas on the next slide that you might think about is just some reminders here. You could embed video clips from the practice guides into your social media posts. Again, if you're on social media and you're scrolling through, Facebook or something like that, those videos are popping up all the time, and they do tend to catch your eye a little bit more than just a static post. So you might think about embedding those posts. You could link the recommended practices or the practice improvement tools from your website. I think some parent centers use text messaging to interact with families. So you could think about doing tips of the day for families using the recommended practices and the practice guides through using text messaging. Again, super easy way to come up with your content, and you're ready to go. And then for centers that might do newsletters, whether print or electronic newsletters, you could highlight a practice a month in a section. You might have a section on your newsletter, but just like an early childhood corner, and you highlight a recommended practice each month. So again, lots of different ways that you can use this material to help really enrich the content of what you're sharing with families in your area. So our next scenario, we're going to move into some scenarios that are more about working with individual families and more about those one-on-one assistance that you either provide face-to-face or maybe via telephone with a family. And in this example, you see what might be a pretty typical call to a parent center. This is a parent of a young child who is trying to understand what to expect and how to prepare for her child's upcoming evaluation for early intervention eligibility. She describes her child a little bit, and she says, I don't even know what to expect. I don't know how do I prepare, and what information should I share with them? Should I give them the reports from my doctor or from a speech therapist that maybe he's seen before, or his hearing audiology reports? What should I share with them? So again, we can look at the practice guides and the tools, the various tools related that would support this scenario. These two are assessment type focused, assessment focused and assessment tools. And again, you can see it where the green arrow points. You can search by topic, click on assessment, and then this page will come up. So you can easily access the checklists and the practice guides, English and Spanish. For example, in this case, you might want to start with the practice guides for families that address specifically the family's role in informed clinical reasoning or the family's role in partnering with team members, because there's some really good practical tips in there that will help this parent or other parents as well really know what to expect and prepare. And I want to kind of pause for just a second here and remind you guys, we're showing you the practice guides a lot, and you'll see them in a couple more examples. The practice guides are not intended to be like a standalone document that you just hand to someone or that you just email to a parent and just say, hey, take a look at this. This will answer your questions. I mean, I know no one's doing that, but I feel like we should say that. They should be shared with a family within the context of a conversation. So you might have a conversation with a family on the phone or face-to-face, really talk to them about some of the tips and things they should think about, in this case, to prepare for their child's evaluation, and then hand them the practice guide if, in fact, it would be helpful to that family. Some families you're going to work with, they're not going to want that piece of paper. They're not going to want that much information, or it might just be too much information on a piece of paper. So you need to think very carefully about how you use them with each family. So to go a little more in depth in this example, we've just given you a couple of, these are just some shots of partnering with your child's assessment team members. Again, a parent center staff might use this as a tool to guide your discussion and guide some of the suggestions that you would give a parent to help them prepare for the evaluation. So, for example, you might, and again, I think some of these are things that you already probably think about and do, but it's a nice, we know this is research-based and it's organized and packaged nicely so that it does provide a guide for you and something that you can readily share. You might talk to the parent about making a list of what their questions are. Who's doing the evaluation? How long does it take? How can I be involved? What kind of tools will they use? You could use this to help the family organize their thoughts before the evaluation and think about what they want to share, about their child, what their child enjoys, how their child plays with toys, how their child interacts with family members. If you're working with a family, again, for a practice guide might be too much information, just show them the video. Click on watch a video of this guide and just show them the video. And don't forget that the practice guides are available in Spanish, and the same strategies could be really effective with Spanish-speaking families. The videos are not in Spanish, but they are captioned in Spanish, and they're still a resource that could be really helpful with a family that is more of a visual learner and needs to see that video. We've got a couple more examples to show you. The next example is a situation where a grandmother has called a parent center asking for assistance in getting her grandson's IFSP team to address his challenges with mealtimes. She says that mealtimes at home and at childcare are a huge struggle. She's got food allergies and he's got oral motor challenges and some fine motor delays, and she just wants to figure out what she really wants is for mealtime not to be so chaotic and for her grandson to enjoy his meals, right, and the family to enjoy meals together. But and she wants him to become more independent with his feeding skills. And so she's asking questions about how do we get this added to the IFSP, and what else should I ask him to do? And she's probably asking questions like, do I need more therapy, or how do I get more therapy for him, and how do we get this fixed? So, you know, as a Parent Center staff member, you might address this in a number of different ways. You would probably start by saying, explaining to her how to just request a meeting of the IFSP team and help her think about what she wants, how she wants to explain her concerns, and how she wants to request revisions to his goals or his services. But in addition, you can use the recommended practices. And we pull up here the recommended practices on instruction. And I think what's really nice about this is the checklists and practice guides here can really be used to help her think about not only what someone else can do to help her grandson, but these are some things that she can do and the family can do to follow his lead, and how to look for things that he enjoys to encourage him to become more independent with feeding. And on the next screen you'll see, or I'm sorry, don't switch it. On this screen you can see all 4 of those practice guides really do provide some really invaluable resources and some good direction for this family and helping him with mealtime. Next slide. So on this slide, I've shown you just 3 selected sections of 3 of the instruction practice guides. So letting your child take the lead, teaching new behaviors systematically, and planning and using embedded learning opportunities. And if you could read those, they're kind of tiny. And if you could look a little closer at them, what you would see is there's information that you could share that might help this family learn how to let the child take the lead, how they could begin to respond when he does, and how to join in, and how to try to make meal times a more positive, interactive experience. You could share information from teaching your child specific behaviors that would give this family some step-by-step tips to follow to help teach him a new skill. The steps might include they're just like how to support and reinforce him so that each attempt he makes to do it a little more independently. And then I think encouraging and child learning in everyday activities can really just help families think about and recognize, at kind of even to a different level, how children learn throughout everything they do every day, at home and in the community and in every routine, at all times of day and all activities. And so really helps them think about what they can do in any of those points in time when they're really struggling. So some really good resources here. And again, don't forget the videos. We have one last example for you, or one last scenario we're going to take a look at. And this scenario is about transitions. We wanted to go into another section of the practice guides, or the recommended practices. In this scenario, Zayden's parents are uncertain about how to prepare for an upcoming IEP meeting to discuss their child's transition to kindergarten. As a Parent Center staff, and if you've been with us for our series of webinars, I hope by now you're thinking, oh my gosh, there's DEC recommended practices for transition. I'm going to go look there and see what I can find. So I really want you to think, kind of internalize, what are those 8 areas? And oh my gosh, there's a practice guide for that, or there's a tool for that, or a video, or something I can use that will help enhance my support to this family. So in this case, this family wants to think about all of his options before the IEP meeting, but they just don't even know what. Everybody agrees he's going to probably continue to need an IEP, but what are the options? What do we begin to do? We know every transition is huge, right? And so how do they begin to prepare? I suspect this is also a fairly common question that we get at Parent Centers. So there are actually 3 specific tools that focus on transition, 3 very specific early childhood transitions that are addressed through these tools. Transition from hospital to home, transition from early intervention to preschool special education, and transition from preschool special ed to kindergarten. So, and I point that out because I want to remind you and kind of help you remember that the recommended practices aren't just for birth to 3, but they really are about birth to 5, birth through 5, really designed, again, to provide guidance about the most effective ways to improve learning outcomes and to promote development of young children across that age range. So it's important to think about that and kind of keep that in mind. I know it's easy to kind of fall into, oh, this is early intervention stuff, but this is definitely applicable and useful and intended to cover that birth through 5 age range. So a lot of the planning and tips in the practice guide for transition to kindergarten are similar to ones that families have likely used to get ready for other transitions, but they're good reminders. Things like involve your child's current teachers and staff in planning, work as a team to create a transition plan, share the IEP, always share information about your child, his interests, abilities, and needs. Visit schools and classrooms that might be options before your decision is made, placement decision, and then after that placement decision is made, visit and observe, where your child's going to be going. And then also, obviously, the whole transition and preparing the child, talking to your child about kindergarten, taking him to visit. And so what you see on this screen here is just one last reminder, again, that the practice guides for families are in English and in Spanish. And as I mentioned, while the videos aren't translated, I really do think they could still be used in a one-on-one interaction where maybe a staff member sits and shares the video with a family that speaks Spanish. And they might either turn the sound down and let them read the captioning, or they might turn the sound down and just sort of narrate and explain what they're seeing. I still think there's really good uses for those videos, and despite, regardless of what the language is that the family might be speaking. Okay, next slide. So as you can see on this slide, we've provided you again with the links to the webinars that we've done previously in this series. So that same link at the top of the screen will get you to webinars 1 and 2. And the webinar today will be at that same link within the next probably few weeks, if not sooner. You've also got the links directly to the overarching list of practice improvement tools, performance checklists, practice guides for practitioners, and then families in English and Spanish. And that's where you can get to each of those sections from these links. Before we open it up for questions, I just want to remind you guys once again that when we do post the recording, the Q&A portion is going to not be included. So we want you to feel like you can ask the questions and we can have some conversations. And I also really want to encourage you to revisit the recorded webinars and share them with your colleagues and your coworkers. Share them with staff that you might supervise that you think could benefit from watching them as often as you need. They're not going anywhere. They're going to be there for a while, so just definitely use them as a staff development tool, if it's appropriate. I think we're going to move to questions.
Stephanie, this is Allison.
Yes.
We had a request to show how to get to the landing page once more.
Okay.
So, Betsy, I know you're running the room. I don't know if we can try to pull up the maybe the first slide screenshot that has the landing page, or if you can try to pull up the website. I know sometimes there's technology challenges with that. Great. So you go to the ECTA Center website, and you'll see on the blue navigation, it says Home, About, IDEA Systems and Practices. So you would click on the Practices icon, and then under Practices, there's Practice Improvement Tools using the DEC recommended practices. So that is the place you would click, and that brings you to the landing page. So that was a good question or a good request to prompt us to kind of go back and as a refresher for everyone. And again, the list of the links are provided as well that take you to some of those specific tools by type.
The next webinar is scheduled for Wednesday, September 11th from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock Eastern Time. And in that webinar, we're going to introduce the aRPy Ambassador Initiative and a new Family Ambassador Project. We're going to talk to you about the process for applying to be an ambassador and how that will potentially be continue to enhance your work in your own parent center. We'll talk about the process and the qualifications and what that looks like, and give you more information about how to go about applying. So mark your calendars, and we hope that you will consider joining us for that webinar. And finally, we just want to thank everyone for your time and your participation today. We've provided our contact information at the end of the PowerPoint if you need to contact any of us for information. And I believe the PowerPoint slides are also uploaded to the website link that we gave you for the archived webinars. So you can actually access the slides there as well. And we give it a little bit of time to get them up there, but it shouldn't take too long. So again, thank you for your time, and thank you for joining us.